The scorching sun beat down as a man in tattered clothes walked up the steep driveway of one of the most luxurious villas in the world. The estate was massive, surrounded by towering gates and security cameras that seemed to follow his every move. He adjusted his worn-out cap, pulling it lower to shield his face, and clutched a small, faded bag slung over his shoulder. His clothes were stained and frayed, his shoes barely holding together, and he looked every bit like someone who didn't belong there. The security guards at the gate exchanged skeptical glances as the man approached. "Can I help you?" one of them asked, his voice sharp, his hand instinctively moving toward the earpiece in his ear. The other guard stood taller, his expression filled with suspicion. "This is private property," he added firmly, crossing his arms. The man paused, wiping his brow with a shaky hand, his voice low and humble. "I was told there might be work here," he said, glancing up at the towering villa in the distance. "I'm willing to do anything. Cleaning, gardening, whatever you need." The guards exchanged incredulous looks, barely holding back their laughter. "You're kidding, right?" one of them said, smirking. "This isn't the kind of place you just show up looking for work." Before the man could respond, a sleek black car pulled up to the gate, its tinted windows reflecting the harsh sunlight. The driver rolled down the window slightly, murmuring something to the guards. They immediately straightened up, their demeanor changing as they opened the gates without hesitation. The car sped past, leaving the man standing there, his shoulders slumped. "Listen," one of the guards said, stepping closer, his tone mocking now. "I don't know who you think you are, but people like you don't belong here. Do yourself a favor and leave before we call the cops." The man nodded quietly, turning to walk away, but not before glancing back at the villa one last time. His eyes lingered on the grand structure, his face unreadable, but something about the way he walked off felt deliberate, as if this was exactly how he wanted things to go. What the guards didn't know, what no one there could have possibly guessed, was that the man in rags was none other than Elon Musk himself. The billionaire entrepreneur, known for his eccentricity and genius, had arrived at his own villa, unrecognizable and unnoticed. But this wasn't just a whim or a social experiment. Elon had a plan, and what would happen next would leave everyone questioning everything they thought they knew about him. As he walked away from the gates, Elon's lips curled into a faint smile. The first part of his plan had worked perfectly, and now it was time to see how the people inside his world really behaved when they thought no one was watching. Elon continued walking down the long driveway, his steps slow and deliberate. Once he was far enough from the villa's gates, he pulled out a small phone from his bag. It wasn't one of the latest models that the world expected Elon Musk to carry. It was an old flip phone, the kind no one would associate with a billionaire. He dialed a number and waited as the line rang twice before a calm, familiar voice answered. "Phase 1 complete," Elon said simply, his voice low and steady. "Now let's see what happens when the truth starts to reveal itself." On the other side of the call, his personal assistant replied, "Understood, Mr. Musk. Should I proceed with the setup inside?" Elon's lips curved into a subtle smile. "Do it, and don't let anyone recognize you. This has to stay under wraps." Ending the call, Elon slipped the phone back into his bag and continued his walk, eventually disappearing into a shaded grove that bordered his vast estate. Unbeknownst to the villa staff and security, Elon had been planning this moment for weeks. He wasn't just there to observe, he was there to test the people who worked for him, those who lived in his world of luxury, but rarely faced accountability. Meanwhile, inside the villa, the staff was buzzing with their usual routine. The kitchen was alive with the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversations. Maria, the head housekeeper, was barking orders to her team. She had worked in the villa for over 5 years and had grown accustomed to the opulence, though she rarely saw Musk himself. To her, he was a name more than a person, someone who paid the bills, but remained distant from the lives of those who kept his empire running. As Maria walked through the main hall, she noticed the same 2 security guards from the gate walking in, chuckling amongst themselves. "You should have seen the guy," one of them said. "He looked like he hadn't showered in weeks. Thought he could just walk up to this place and get a job." Maria frowned, her expression hardening. "Who are you talking about?" she asked, stopping in her tracks. The guard smirked. "Some random guy off the street. Said he was looking for work. We sent him packing, obviously." Maria's eyes narrowed. You didn't even let him explain? What if he actually needed help? The other guard shrugged. Not our problem. People like that have no business being here. Maria shook her head in disapproval but didn't press the issue further. She knew how the staff treated outsiders, especially those who didn't fit the image of wealth and privilege. It was something she had grown used to, though it never sat right with her. Unbeknownst to them all, Elon was watching. Hidden cameras placed strategically throughout the villa streamed live footage to his private viewing room, a modest space tucked away in a guest house on the property. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes scanning the screens as he observed his staff in real time. His focus shifted to Maria, who had now returned to the kitchen, instructing her team with a mix of authority and empathy. She's sharp, Elon muttered to himself. But let's see how sharp. At that moment, Elon's assistant walked into the kitchen, disguised as a delivery man carrying a large box. Excuse me, he said, his voice polite but firm. I have a delivery for the owner of the villa. Maria turned, her eyes narrowing slightly. Mr. Musk isn't here, she said. You can leave it with me. The assistant shook his head. I was told to deliver this directly. It's a matter of urgency. Maria hesitated, glancing at the box, then at the man's face. Something about him felt off, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Reluctantly, she nodded. Fine, bring it in. As the assistant set the box down, he deliberately left a small, crumpled envelope on the counter, barely noticeable among the chaos of the kitchen. Maria's eyes flickered to it briefly, but before she could say anything, the assistant had already left. Elon, watching from his screen, leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. Now the real test begins, he said softly, his expression unreadable. What Maria and the rest of the staff didn't know was that the envelope contained something that could change everything. And in the coming hours, the decisions they made would reveal their true character and determine their fate in ways they couldn't imagine. Maria stared at the crumpled envelope left behind on the counter, her curiosity nagging at her. The kitchen was bustling with activity, her staff rushing to prepare meals and tidy the already immaculate villa. But something about the envelope felt strange, out of place. She picked it up hesitantly, glancing around to see if anyone else had noticed. No one had. With a deep breath, she opened it. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. As she unfolded it, her hands trembled slightly. Written in neat, deliberate handwriting were the words, "To those who work tirelessly in the shadows, today is your chance to show who you truly are. The smallest actions often reveal the greatest truths." Maria's brow furrowed, and her eyes darted back to the box the delivery man had brought in. It was sealed tightly, unassuming yet suddenly mysterious. What did this mean? Why would someone leave a cryptic note like this? She glanced around the kitchen again, her heart beating faster. "Maria, everything okay?" one of the cooks asked, noticing her distracted expression. "Yeah," Maria said quickly, folding the note and tucking it into her apron pocket. Just a delivery, nothing important." But it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like the start of something much bigger. Meanwhile, back in his hidden viewing room, Elon Musk leaned closer to the monitor, watching Maria's reaction intently. Her hesitation, her curiosity, it was exactly what he had expected. "Let's see what she does next," he murmured, his eyes flicking to another screen showing the rest of the villa staff going about their duties, completely unaware of what was unfolding. In the grand living room, the two security guards who had mocked him earlier were lounging near the entrance, chatting idly. "Can you believe the nerve of that guy at the gate?" one of them said, still amused by the encounter. "Probably thought we'd feel sorry for him." The other laughed. "Yeah, right. People like that don't get anywhere near this place. Imagine what Mr. Musk would think if he saw someone like that walking up here." Elon smirked as he watched them on the screen. If only they knew. Back in the kitchen, Maria decided she couldn't ignore the strange delivery any longer. She approached the box cautiously, her mind racing with questions. What if it was something important? What if it was dangerous? But before she could act, Carlos, a young kitchen assistant, walked over. "Need help with that, Maria?" he asked, noticing her hesitation. Maria shook her head. "No, I've got it," she said quickly, but Carlos didn't budge. "Come on, you're already running the whole place. Let me take some of the load off," he said with a grin, reaching for the box. Before she could protest, Carlos had torn the tape open. Inside was something that made both of them freeze. A small, sleek tablet with a single glowing message on the screen. Press play. Maria and Carlos exchanged a look, their confusion mirrored in each other's faces. "This is getting weird," Carlos muttered. Maria hesitated, her finger hovering over the screen. "Should we?" "We don't have much choice, do we?" Carlos replied, his voice a mix of nervousness and curiosity. Taking a deep breath, Maria tapped the screen. The tablet immediately began playing a video. At first, the screen was dark, but then an unmistakable face appeared. Elon Musk himself, though still dressed in the tattered clothes he'd worn earlier. "Hello," Elon said, his voice calm but laced with something that sounded almost like amusement. "If you're watching this, it means you've already started playing a part in something bigger than you realize. Today, I'm not just your employer. I'm your test." Maria's eyes widened, and Carlos's jaw dropped as they listened to Elon's words. "What happens next," Elon continued, "depends entirely on you. Every decision you make today will be observed, every action weighed, not just by me, but by the people you think aren't watching." The screen went dark again, leaving only a simple message. "Will you rise to the occasion?" Maria stared at the tablet, her heart racing. Carlos ran a hand through his hair, his usual carefree demeanor replaced by a growing sense of unease. "What does that even mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Maria replied, her voice trembling slightly. "But I think we're about to find out." Unbeknownst to them, Elon was watching everything, his fingers steepled in front of him as he studied their reactions. The game had begun, and the villa's staff had no idea just how much their actions that day would define their futures, or how their true selves were about to be revealed. As the video message ended, Maria and Carlos stood frozen, the weight of Elon Musk's words hanging heavy in the air. The silence in the kitchen was broken only by the distant hum of the villa's air conditioning. Maria glanced at the tablet again, her mind racing with questions. "What kind of test is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Carlos, still staring at the screen, shook his head. "This has to be some kind of experiment, right? I mean, Musk is known for his crazy ideas, but this feels different." Before Maria could respond, the sound of raised voices echoed from the grand hallway. She quickly slipped the tablet into a drawer, motioning for Carlos to follow her. As they stepped into the hallway, they found the two security guards standing near the entrance, arguing with a delivery driver who looked visibly distressed. He held a large battered box in his hands, his uniform soaked with sweat. "I told you this delivery is urgent," the driver said, his voice shaky but insistent. "I need to get this inside now." The taller guard sneered, blocking his path. "And I told you, we don't take unscheduled deliveries. If it's so important, you should have called ahead." Maria stepped forward, her tone firm but polite. "What's going on here?" The driver turned to her, relief washing over his face. "Ma'am, I was instructed to deliver this directly to the staff. It's from Mr. Musk himself." The guards scoffed, one of them crossing his arms. "Yeah, right. Musk doesn't send random boxes through sweaty delivery guys." Maria ignored them, her eyes narrowing as she studied the driver. Something about his nervous energy felt genuine. "Give it to me," she said, extending her hand. The guards started to protest, but Maria silenced them with a sharp glare. "If this is from Mr. Musk, we don't want to risk ignoring it. And if it's not, I'll take responsibility." The driver hesitated for a moment before handing the box to her. "Thank you," he said quietly before turning and walking away, glancing nervously over his shoulder as he exited the villa. Maria carried the box into the dining room, Carlos trailing behind her. She set it down on the large oak table, eyeing it cautiously. "This is getting stranger by the minute," she muttered. "Should we open it?" Carlos asked, his voice filled with equal parts excitement and fear. Maria nodded slowly. "We don't have a choice." With careful hands, she opened the box, revealing several smaller packages inside, each labeled with a staff member's name. At the bottom of the box was another tablet, identical to the one they had found earlier. Maria picked it up, and as she pressed the screen, another video began to play. Elon appeared again, still in his disguise, but this time his tone was more serious. "By now you've realized that today is no ordinary day," he began, Inside this box are items meant specifically for each of you. They represent challenges, situations that will test your character, your integrity, and your ability to adapt. How you respond will determine not only your future here, but what kind of person you truly are. Maria and Carlos exchanged uneasy glances as the video continued. You may think this is about me testing you, Elon said, his voice softening. But in reality, this is about you testing yourselves. The choices you make, the way you treat others, it's all a reflection of who you are. So choose wisely. The video ended, leaving the room in silence once again. Maria looked down at the packages, her name written neatly on one of them. She hesitated, her hand hovering over it, before finally tearing the wrapping. Inside was a simple notebook and pen, along with a card that read, "Leadership isn't about giving orders. It's about earning trust. Today, your leadership will be tested." Carlos opened his package next, revealing a small toolkit and a note that read, "Every problem has a solution. Today, it's your job to find it." The two stared at their items, their minds racing with possibilities. "What do you think this means?" Carlos asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Maria replied, her tone filled with uncertainty, "but I have a feeling this isn't going to be easy." As the rest of the staff began to discover their packages and the mysterious instructions inside, the villa seemed to take on a new energy. Everyone was on edge, unsure of what was happening, but unable to ignore the weight of Elon Musk's challenge. And as Elon watched from his hidden room, a faint smile played on his lips. "Let's see who they really are," he murmured, his eyes scanning the screens. The real test had just begun, and the choices made in the next few hours would change everything. The villa was no longer operating as usual. The staff moved cautiously, each person clutching their assigned package, their minds racing with questions. The cryptic messages and the weight of Elon Musk's words hung heavy in the air. Maria stood in the kitchen, staring at the notebook and pen she had received. The phrase, "Leadership isn't about giving orders. It's about earning trust," replaying in her mind like a mantra. Carlos, meanwhile, sat at the dining room table, fiddling nervously with the toolkit from his package. "What kind of test is this?" he muttered under his breath, his frustration evident. "I fix things all the time. Why send me a toolkit like it's something new?" Before Maria could respond, a sudden commotion from the main hall caught their attention. The sound of glass shattering and raised voices echoed through the villa. Maria exchanged a quick glance with Carlos before hurrying toward the source of the noise. In the main hall, one of the security guards was standing over a broken vase, his face red with anger. "I told you to stay out of here," he barked at a young cleaner who was cowering nearby, her face pale and frightened. I, I'm sorry," the cleaner stammered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I was just trying to dust." "You've done enough," the guard snapped, his voice booming. "This is why people like you don't belong in places like this." Maria stepped forward, her voice firm. "That's enough," she said, her tone cutting through the tension. The guard turned to her, clearly irritated, but Maria didn't back down. "Accidents happen. There's no need to humiliate her." The guard scoffed, crossing his arms. "We've got enough chaos going on today, without clumsy people making it worse." Maria's eyes narrowed. "And shouting at her is going to fix it? Or maybe, just maybe, you could show a little understanding." The guard glared at her but didn't respond. Maria turned to the cleaner, her tone softening. "Go grab a broom and clean this up. It's just a vase. It's not the end of the world." The cleaner nodded quickly, her eyes filled with gratitude as she hurried off to fetch cleaning supplies. Maria turned back to the guard, her voice sharp. "Next time, think before you yell. We're all under pressure, but that doesn't give you the right to take it out on someone else." From his hidden viewing room, Elon leaned closer to the screen, his lips curling into a faint smile. "She's stepping up," he murmured, but his focus quickly shifted to another screen, where a different drama was unfolding. Carlos had wandered into the basement, where a strange sound had caught his attention. A low hum echoed through the space, accompanied by the faint flicker of a light bulb that seemed on the verge of burning out. As he approached the source of the noise, he found an old generator tucked into a corner, wires hanging loose and sparking intermittently. Carlos stared at the generator, his mind racing. The toolkit from his package suddenly made sense. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered, dropping to his knees to inspect the mess. It was clear that the generator was vital to the villa's power supply, and if it failed, the entire estate would be plunged into darkness. He opened the toolkit and began working, his hands moving quickly but carefully. The hum of the generator grew louder, the sparks more erratic, and sweat began to beat on his forehead. He muttered to himself as he worked, the weight of Elon Musk's challenge pressing down on him. Every problem has a solution, he repeated, as if trying to convince himself. Back upstairs, Maria had returned to the kitchen, where she found a small group of staff members gathered, their faces filled with uncertainty. One of them, a middle-aged chef, held up his package, a single key with no explanation. What does this even mean, he asked, his frustration evident. Is this some kind of game to him? Maria held up her notebook and pen. It's not a game, she said firmly. It's a test. And if there's one thing I know about Elon Musk, it's that he doesn't do anything without a reason. The group fell silent, their eyes on Maria as she spoke. We've all been given something, she continued. Something that's supposed to challenge us. We can complain about it, or we can step up and prove that we're more than just staff, that we're people who can rise to the occasion. The room was quiet for a moment before one of the younger staff members, a dishwasher, spoke up. So, what do we do? Maria took a deep breath, holding up her notebook. We start by working together. No one gets through this alone. As the group began to discuss their next steps, Elon watched from his hidden room, his expression thoughtful. Leadership isn't about giving orders, he repeated softly, echoing the words he had written in Maria's note. It's about inspiring others to believe in themselves. In the basement, Carlos let out a triumphant shout as the generator roared back to life, the lights stabilizing and the hum smoothing out. He wiped his brow, a small grin spreading across his face. One problem solved, he muttered, packing up his tools. But little did they know, the biggest challenges were still to come. The next phase of Elon's test was about to begin, and it would push everyone in the villa to their limits. As the day went on, the villa's staff continued to face unexpected challenges. The cryptic notes, the subtle tests of character, and the looming pressure of being watched weighed heavily on everyone. Yet slowly but surely, a shift began to take place. Maria, now taking charge, rallied the team together. Whatever this is, we're going to handle it as a team, she said, her voice steady and full of determination. Her notebook, once just an item of mystery, had become a tool for planning and coordination. She assigned roles, encouraged collaboration, and began to turn chaos into order. Carlos, still riding the high of fixing the generator, offered to help wherever he could. What else needs solving? He asked, his energy infectious. The staff, once divided by their roles and frustrations, began to work together in ways they never had before. Meanwhile, Elon watched everything unfold from his hidden room. On his monitors, he saw Maria's leadership flourish, Carlos's resourcefulness shine, and even the security guards, humbled by their earlier behavior, start pitching in. The transformation was undeniable. The people he had once thought of as mere employees had revealed themselves to be problem solvers, leaders, and, most importantly, individuals with heart and integrity. By the evening, the staff gathered in the grand living room, visibly exhausted but oddly united. It was then that Elon, still dressed in his tattered disguise, walked in. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at him, confusion and curiosity etched on their faces. Maria stepped forward, her voice tentative, but firm. Who are you? Elon smiled faintly, removing the cap from his head. I'm Elon Musk, he said simply. Gasps filled the room, disbelief rippling through the staff. The man they had ignored, dismissed, or helped throughout the day had been their employer all along. Elon took a step closer, his expression serious but kind. Today wasn't just about testing you, he said. It was about understanding the people who make this place what it is. I wanted to see how you would act when no one was looking, how you'd treat someone you thought was beneath you. And what I saw impressed me. He turned to Maria. You stepped up when it mattered most. You didn't just give orders, you earned trust. That's leadership. Then to Carlos, he said, you didn't wait for someone to tell you what to do. You saw a problem and fixed it. That's the kind of initiative that changes the world. Elon's gaze swept across the rest of the staff. Each of you showed me something today, Empathy, teamwork, resilience. These aren't just qualities that make you good employees. They're what make you extraordinary people. The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Finally, Maria spoke, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Musk. But why go through all of this? Elon smiled. Because sometimes the greatest truths are revealed in the smallest moments. And today you prove something not just to me, but to yourselves. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. This, he said, holding it up, is a bonus fund for every single person in this room. Consider it my way of saying thank you for everything you do, seen and unseen. The room erupted into applause, tears streaming down the faces of some of the staff. For the first time, they felt truly seen and appreciated, not just as workers, but as individuals. As Elon left the villa that night, he glanced back at the illuminated estate, a faint smile playing on his lips. The day hadn't just been about testing his staff, it had been a lesson for him as well. Leadership wasn't just about innovation or success. It was about the people who made those things possible. Inside, Maria sat with her notebook open, scribbling down plans for how the team could continue working more cohesively in the future. Carlos, still clutching his toolkit, joked with the other staff about the day's chaos, the group laughing together in a way they never had before. For everyone involved, this wasn't just a test or a challenge, it was a turning point. And as they settled into the quiet of the evening, the team realized they weren't just employees of the world's richest man, they were part of something bigger, something that mattered. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us how the smallest actions can reveal the greatest truths. Stay tuned for the next chapter of humanity and innovation.